I'd like to give a lesson today on some of the rhythmic variations that Sam Jones uses on Miss Jackie's Delight, which is a really nice blues tune that comes from the Cannonball Adderley album Sophisticated Swing from 1957. It's a blues in F, and we're going to look specifically at the rhythms that he's playing. So the first couple of choruses is what we're going to look at today. And for the most part, these two choruses are unaccompanied bass. We do start to hear the drums come in at around the second chorus. So we'll start out with the most basic version of this. We have two versions for this lesson. The first one is without the extra rhythmic things that he's doing, just so you can hear what the bass line sounds like in its most basic form. And then the second version is going to be with the extra rhythmic variations that he's adding in. And most of these ideas that he's using in this bass line are made with the right hand. And we'll take a look at that in a second. So what I'll do first is just play this bass line for you. So that's the bass line without the extra rhythms added in. There are a couple of obvious rhythms that he's using, which I have notated in this version. So the main ones would be in the first bar, of course, he's not playing a note on beat 1, he's leaving out the note on beat 1 and just playing on the and of beat 1. 1 and 2, 3, 4. Which gives it this nice bouncy quality to the bass line. And if we look at bar 4, just a simple thing of playing an eighth note on the third, playing two eighth notes on the third beat, just gives it some nice movement. If we look at the first bar of the turnaround at the end of the second chorus, where he goes way up to a high F, he does this big drop down to the open A. And that also is a fairly typical walking bass effect that you can use in your playing. But what I really wanted to focus on in this lesson was some of the more subtle rhythmic variations that he's using. And so now we're going to turn to the version of this bass line with the extra embellishments. So if we were to notate all of the extra rhythmic embellishments that he's using, the transcription would look something like this. Now, even with this bass line being unaccompanied on the recording, it can still be quite difficult to hear him using these ideas. So try to read along with the music and see if you can hear these extra rhythmic notes that I've notated in the sheet music. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's break down these rhythmic effects and see if we can try to get some of them into our own lines. As I mentioned at the start of the video, most of these effects are done with the right hand. And for walking on the upright bass, there's a couple ways that I like to do it to make it easy, to make them easier to play. Just in general, I like to play most of my quarter notes with the first finger. And play the rhythmic variations with the second finger. And so I'll show you how that works. So the first example we're going to look at is coming from the first 2 bars of this bass line, and it's a fairly common walking bass drop that you can add into your playing. And it works really nicely, of course, over F major, because F major's got that open A string that we can really make use of for this drop. So let's look at exercise 1. We're playing 2 8th notes on the first beat of F. But pay attention to the way that they're accented. The first 8th note is played as a staccato. So we're playing that note really short. And the second 8th note is as an accented note. So you get this effect. The first one being short, the second one being accented. Immediately after that, we go into a drop down to the open A string on beat 2. And that all happens in one motion. So let me just play the first example. So this is a right-hand raking pattern. So we're raking from the F with the first finger down to the open A string all in one motion with the right hand. The second example, which I'm calling 1A, is what Sam Jones plays in the first 2 bars, where he's taking out the first 8th note on beat 1. And that sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. One little trick that I like to do with this, if you're finding it hard to feel that 8th note rest on beat 1, what you can do is you can just hit the bass with your hand on the downbeat of beat 1 and then come in with the second 8th note to help to get the feeling of that. And then once that starts to become comfortable for you, then you can leave out the whack on the bass and just play it as written. So it might sound something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'll take out the hit. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's exercise 1A. Exercise 1B is coming from the second chorus of this walking line. And this brings us to one of the other right-hand techniques that I was talking about at the start of the video, where we use the second finger to play the percussive notes or to play the dead notes. This can be kind of tough to get the hang of at first. So the way that I like to practice these is just to do a bunch of them. And we'll come to that in one of the later exercises, but let's look at exercise 1B here. So it starts off the same as exercise 1. But when we get to this B natural note, we're going to pluck B natural with the first finger, and then using the second finger, get that X note in there. So just once again, I pluck B natural and I'm plucking the E string underneath that note B. Same thing for C, plucking C with the first finger and then making an X note on the E string underneath to get that sound. Same thing for this E natural. So the E natural is on the D string, so I'm going to pluck the percussive note on the A string underneath. Okay, let me play that example one more time. Moving on to exercise 2, this line comes from the first chorus, bar 4, and it's another raking pattern with this hand, but the X note is actually played with the first finger during the rake. Okay, so we're playing a C, and then for the second eighth note, we're going to play the X note with the same finger and rake down to the G flat. All in one motion. Just play that bit over and over again. And the second half of the bar is the same idea as we've seen in the previous examples. Making sure to get in all of those articulations that we have written. The staccato followed by the accent. Really helps to give the bass line a bouncy quality, and your walking lines will sound much more interesting, and you'll be able to feel like you're pushing the band forward when you add in these sounds into your playing. So let's move on to the third exercise now. And this comes back to what I was mentioning with exercise 1B, with the percussive notes played with the second finger. So what we want to do is play a whole bunch of these just to get used to it. So the third exercise comes from the first chorus, measure 6 on B flat 7, and we're starting on the note C. And we're playing every note that's on the beat with the first finger, and once again, all of the percussive notes with the second finger. So beat 1 doesn't have a percussive note, it's just C. Play that with the first finger. Second beat is B natural, and then we'll play the percussive note with the middle finger. Same thing for B flat, and back to B. Make sure when you're playing these that you're counting every triplet. So you might want to count it like this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. It's harder to play them at lower tempos because you don't actually want the percussive note to be a note, right? So you don't want it to be a D string, you just want it to be like that. So it actually gets easier to play these rhythmic ideas when you bring the tempo up. But try to play it at a low tempo just to get the feeling. Count out every triplet. Slowly get faster to the point where you can't physically count each triplet because it's a bit too fast. And then you're pretty much there. You're on the right track to getting these ideas under your fingers. So let me just play the third example again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. And last but not least, the final example is taking that same rhythmic pattern and applying it to every beat. And that will sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's pretty much it. As far as I can work out, those are the ideas that he's using in his walking line. And now this is all a very subjective thing. There are probably some X notes and percussive ideas that I've missed. And you may go and listen to this recording and hear some ideas that I haven't notated, and that's perfectly fine. But you could also hear things that sound like they could be rhythmic, percussive type ideas, but are actually really just the naturally occurring sounds and noises that you get from playing the double bass. So it can actually be very difficult to completely identify what is a rhythmic note and what's not, what's just like normal sounds that you hear from the bass. So those are the ideas for the upright bass. I'm now going to go over and pick up the electric bass and show you how I would play them on that, because it's a little bit different. So as I mentioned during the upright bass portion of this video, I like to play the quarter notes with my first finger and the percussive notes with my second finger. For the electric bass, it's the other way around. So I play the quarter notes with my second finger and the percussive notes with my first finger. For me personally, I find that the most comfortable for this bass and not for the double bass. So let me play the simplified version without the extra rhythms, and notice how I'm playing them all with the second finger on my right hand. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'll play the bass line with the percussive notes added in. 1, 2, 3, 4. And last but not least, I'm going to really quickly just run through these rhythmic examples again, but on the electric bass, so that electric players can see how that looks with the right hand. So take a look at the way I'm playing this first example, exercise 1. You may notice that I'm not always consistently playing all of the quarter notes with the second finger, but I will definitely be doing that when we get into the X notes in the next couple of exercises. So that was exercise 1. Exercise 1A, with the first eighth note left off of the first beat, sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exercise 1B sounds and looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exercise 2 sounds and looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Exercise 3 sounds and looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. And finally, exercise 3A sounds and looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, so that's all we have time for in this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope this sheds some light onto some of the rhythmic possibilities that many of the great jazz bass players are using and how they're doing it with their right hand. A lot of the rhythmic ideas I use, they also make them with their left hand, but we'll save that for a different lesson. If you enjoyed this bass lesson, I would really appreciate your support over on my Patreon page. There's a link down below. There you can download all of the walking bass material, plus the exercises that we discussed in this lesson. And you can download them both in standard notation as well as tab, for those of you that don't read music notation. So thank you so much for checking out this lesson. I really hope you got something out of it and you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.